In modern popular culture, people yearn for something more in their lives. A way to live, a motto to live by, just something applicable and trustworthy to follow and believe in. Some turn to religion, others to public figures, but a small minority of people opt for ancient teachings from long-dead philosophers. One such example of this is Sun Tzu, best known for his book The Art of War, and its teaching relating to warfare in the matter of which battles and wars are won. In popular culture, his advice is heated and adapted to fit modern needs, like interpreting his advice surrounding defeating your enemy as overcoming obstacles in your life. However, in this effort to seem deep and meaningful, much of Sun Tzu's teachings bear little to no importance on today's society, not only because they were not made for everyday life, but because even if they did fit this regiment long ago, they no longer do due to social change. Supporters of quoting The Art of War in modern non-war scenarios mostly like the quotes because they feel as if the cryptic and poetic nature of the book somehow adds magnificent insight into how to live one's life. Moreover, the more abstract the reference or quote is, the more popular it tends to be. I think this is applicable to almost every instance of a quote. The more cryptic and seemingly meaningful it is, the more popular it is. However, these quotes just hold very little meaning to our lives for a few reasons. Firstly, due to our human desires to want order and a rigid structure to our lives, we'll hang on to anything and everything that gives us even an inkling of that feeling. Secondly, as these quotes fulfill that desire, and because a secret to life seems mystical and mysterious, we perceive quotes and advice with more abstract and harder to understand messages as more meaningful or helpful in our lives. Despite this, the fact is that these quotes serve no purpose but to comfort us for a short period of time where we think we understand the world. Supposedly life-changing quotes only really have a very short-term effect on us, as we are likely to forget them soon after. And even if we don't, and we have a quote a day on our calendar or on our phone lock screens, constantly bombarding us with this information, a lot of the time it isn't helpful. All of these quotes seem meaningful because they appeal to our ideals in life, especially ideals that relate to older forms of society, like the extremely economically free and prosperous mid to late 19th century. The truth stands now that life is not perfect in nature, and it will always seek to disorder. There are imperfections everywhere and things you cannot prepare for, and even fewer situations in which to apply these seemingly meaningful quotes. How is one meant to apply abstract terms like be adaptable, have faith always, and take your time, especially when shrouded by flowery language in their stressful 9 to 5? There are no rules in which we can live by, if not for the unpredictability of life, then for our inability to follow all of these seemingly important rules. In my opinion, the most pure and applicable advice is the straight set ideas and guides to certain activities and common experiences, like school, work, and family life, and in these straightforward ideas lies the best type of quote. Despite the overall meaningless and abstract quotes though, there is a practical use for them, which I covered earlier. They give us hope. An uplifting and encouraging quote can change a person's mood or frame of mind for 20 minutes, which is all it may take to give someone the emotional drive to do something, like finish a project or do something they've been procrastinating about, or even to get them through a tough time. In the long term, these quotes might mean nothing, but at least in the short term, they give us something to live for. Another side to these quotes is on the internet, where people have recognized the absurdity of some of Sun Tzu's quotes, and a common sight on forums are memes with quotes of Sun Tzu, whether fake or real, highlighting the true meaningless nature of a lot of his writing. And to show you an example of this, I will now present to you the top 10 most meaningless Sun Tzu quotes that give us zero insight on how to live life and show why the internet has collectively decided to clown on him. Most of these fall into the category of being painfully obvious and unnecessary to make into a quote, but a few are just shockingly devoid of all meaning. Number 1. Ponder and deliberate before you make a move. This is pretty painfully obvious and doesn't really need a quote of its own to tell us in modern society that we need to think and take our time. Additionally, it's probably not even possible for all of us to take time before we make every single decision. It's only applicable some of the time. Number 2. If his forces are united, separate them. This one is pretty much only applicable to war and conflict and serves very little purpose in our lives. Additionally, it's pretty obvious, even if you were in a war or battle, that this is what you'd try to do. Number 3. Be where your enemy is not. This quote has two sides of meaninglessness. Number 1, if you're going to be where your enemy is not, you're unlikely to be able to confront them and defeat them. It's almost counterintuitive to his entire art of war. Secondly, if you were trying to avoid your enemy and not being beaten because they're stronger than you, like in a war, that's pretty obvious, right? Number 4, you have to believe in yourself. I find it hard to believe that this itself is a Sun Tzu quote, but it is. It's pretty self-explanatory, and in the common public rhetoric, it's not a quote that needs to be put on such a high prestige as Sun Tzu, The Art of War. This is something you might find on Pinterest with some clip art next to it. It's not revolutionary, and it's pretty common practice in these days. Number 5, there is no instance of a nation benefiting from prolonged warfare. You don't have to look far into the past to see evidence of this happening in history. While it may seem that because it's happened in history, this quote needs to exist, it really doesn't. A lot of people aren't going to need this in their lives, and if it is somewhat applicable to modern settings, it's only really applicable to a few people, and at that, doesn't need such abstract language to describe it. Number 6, do not swallow bait offered by the enemy. This one is so painfully obvious that it's almost like comparing a human to a fish. Of course you shouldn't fall for your enemy's traps. That's the number 1 rule in war, in life, in whatever. Number 7, to know your enemy, you must become your enemy. To me, this quote is incredibly useless, because it's really just telling you that you need to know your enemy twice. Becoming your enemy is just about knowing your enemy on a deeper level. Furthermore, this is incredibly unapplicable to modern life, as a lot of these tactics are about a physical opponent compared to more non-physical opponents in your day-to-day life. Number 8, so in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and strike at what is weak. I don't think Sun Tzu could have come up with a more obvious and self-evident quote than that. Basically, what he's trying to tell you is that go where it's easier to win. That is incredibly simple-minded and doesn't add much at all. Number 9, the wise warrior avoids the battle. This is just such a brain-dead quote because it assumes that you can avoid the battle at all. Most of the time, war is unavoidable, and especially in modern context, this idea of avoiding a battle is more akin to procrastination, which is something we look down upon. It's not something that you want to encourage through these quotes. This one is probably one of the most meaningless out of the bunch. And lastly, number 10, if you can't defeat them, defeat yourself so they cannot defeat you. This is a quote, that's for sure. What it means, I couldn't tell you. It's full of gibberish and it's indecipherable from proper advice. Defeating yourself is not a good message to promote. I don't know what Sun Tzu was thinking here. This is the most brain-dead quote of them all. And that, my friends, is the end of today's video on the meaninglessness of quotes and Sun Tzu's philosophy. Thanks for watching.